Fred, great to see you.
Likewise. Thank you for doing this today.
Pleasure.
I really appreciate it. I know I've called in a major favour, and it's going to cost me for a long time. I know that. But we'll see what the rugby result looks like tomorrow, right?
Yep.
Was it $20? Is that we've bet this time?
$20. You're a little light. That's okay.
So, thinking about our audience here today,
Yep.
there's going to be a lot of people that know who you are, and they've been to the Gauge before in their trips to Chicago, but there's going to be a lot of people that don't know who you are,
Right.
and they don't have an experience at the Gauge. Can you give us a little bit of background of who you are, and also a little bit of the immigrant story, if you will, of Irishman comes to America,
Sure.
specifically Chicago?
Yeah, cool. Well, I'm Billy Lawless. So I'm originally from Galway in the west coast of Ireland on the Atlantic side of the ocean over there. I came here when I was 25. So I went to boarding school, went to college in England, worked in hotels in Egypt. So I was always kind of away from home. So moving over here wasn't a big deal. When I moved back from Egypt, there was not much happening for me back in Ireland, and my dad decided to open up something here in Chicago, and I just didn't want to live in Ireland, so I felt this would be a great opportunity. So I moved here when I was 25.
So it's been a triangle then,
Yeah.
Ireland to Egypt to Chicago,
Yeah.
with a bit of a dog leg in Galway on the way back over.
Yeah, and college in England.
There you go.
Yeah.
There you go. So my understanding is you were 32 years old when you set this up.
Yeah, when we started this project, I was 32. So I had my first, my son was born when I was 29, and I opened my first place a couple of months after he was born, a little neighborhood place up in Lincoln Square. I ran that for 3 years, and then this opportunity came up. Dad gave me a buzz one day. He said he found a place downtown. He wanted to look at it. So I came down here, we met. Millennium Park had just opened 4 years later. So I just said, Dad, we got to do this. I mean, the location I thought was spectacular, the parks, everything around here, and it was still under the radar. So at the time, there was only ourselves, and there was 3 national chains vying for this location. And so Dad really wanted to do an Irish pub here, and I was really against that. So he had a designer that he thought would be a great fit because he could build things really quickly. So we checked out one of his locations on the south side, and we walked in, and I kind of looked at Dad and I go, Dad, is this really what you want to put on Michigan Avenue? And he goes, no. And then he says, why don't you take it from there? So I kind of spearheaded things from that regard in terms of design, concept.
So let me just understand that, because I didn't know that part of your story, having known you for so long.
Yeah.
35 years old, and you've got a 3-year-old, and you're going to convince your missus that you want to go and do this. What did that conversation look like?
She was 100% behind me. So Kathy has been incredibly successful in her own career in healthcare, specifically in the neurosurgery field. So she's one of the most respected lay people in her field, and she set up a Swedish medical device company here that sold. It sold a machine that treated radiation treatment for tumors. And it was founded by a famous Swedish scientist called Lars Leksell. So she was really behind it. She really believed in the location. We really want to do something that was more European here, sort of based on the European gastropubs the London gastropubs, I should say. So she was instrumental in really sort of identifying the brand we wanted to go, and I was behind it 100% because it was right in my wheelhouse.
Let's be specific about that. Yeah. To you, there's a big difference between an Irish pub and what you've created here at the
100%, yeah. 100%. So, I mean, we kind of dispense with all the kind of, the bric-a-brac, the sort of shillelagh, how you doing kind of thing. But we did keep our core identity as, hospitality first, taking care of the guests, which is like quintessential to any Irish experience.
Right.
But this is my interpretation of what I think is, this is kind of environment that I would like to eat in, dine in, drink in. I think the Irish pub abroad really, did a great service to the Irish sort of brand, so to speak.
Anyone that know you that's been to the Gauge or any of your other restaurants here in Chicago actually would understand that your presence. Yeah. We know when you're in the building.
Sure,
right?
sure, yeah.
Because of the way that you do engage with all of your customers or clients. I'm not exactly sure what you'd call them.
Customers, clients, friends, regulars. I mean, we have a whole plethora of humanity that comes through the doors. Some I know, some I don't, but we try and treat everybody equally. Obviously, if you know me, you're going to get a little, you're going to do a little better.
For sure, for sure.
Such is life.
But I think people would recognise, and they've teased you about it mercilessly, of course, is that how hard you work.
Yeah.
And if I think again about that start that you had,
Sure.
to where you are, there's got to be an easier living.
It's all I know, though. So I went to hotel school. My dad was a dairy farmer. So in the late 70s, he sold his farm to developers because the city that we grew up in was developing out to his farmland, which is right outside the city limits. So he sold to developers. Then Dad got into the bar business. He was very successful at that. He had some of the most successful pubs in our hometown in Galway. His brother is a very famous hotelier, just retired. So, after the farm was gone, I was only 7. So like hospitality was kind of, was there for us as a, how would you say it? I mean, that's all I knew in terms of, of the professions I wanted to do. And I was very, very enamored with my uncle's trajectory as a hotelier, and then Dad's success in the, bar and restaurant business. So I like people, I gravitated towards the environment, towards the, it's a fun environment. It's hard work, but it's all I know.
Right. Is this, the quintessential coming to America story, success story?
Well, for me it is, because what I've done here, I don't think I could have replicated in Ireland for a couple of reasons. The opportunity, and then I think the scale, what we've done. I mean, just the density in America is so much greater, obviously, than Ireland. It's just statistically. I also think, I got some breaks here that I don't think I would have gotten in Ireland.
Can you tell us about one of those?
Well, like any location like this, sort of Main Street, Ireland, like be it in Dublin, Galway, Cork, everything's already, everything is stored up. It's very hard to get, premier locations like this. I mean, this sort of fell in our laps, and we went for it, and we put everything on the line to make this happen financially. So Dad and I, mortgage everything. Myself and my wife remortgage our home. It ended up being a $4 million project, probably more if you want to, including soft costs and development costs. So, for us at the time, that was like an immense amount of money and very scary. But we really believed in location, and to put that kind of money on the table, I don't think you would have gotten that return back in Ireland.
So let's follow on that train of thought then about location and brand experience. You mentioned that there were 3 other players against you. Were you the protagonist brand because they were the bigger players?
No, there was just there was no, ironically, there was no local brands going for this location. There was 3 fast casual brands looking at this location. So this used to be a Burger King. And then after Burger King, it was a running store. So when I came in here, all these walls were just lined with shelving. It took us 2 days to get it was insane, the amount of just because you collect old advertisement boxes and whatnot. Every single shelf was covered with shelving.
So let's talk about brand experience then, because that'll be a term that the audience will be very familiar with.
Sure.
Be it a tin of dog food or candy bar or all-encompassing.
Yeah.
Here's the brand that sits in the middle, and here's the ecosystem that sits around it.
Right.
However, in the restaurant world, it is a brand experience. You have to encompass all 5 senses.
From A to Z, absolutely.
So how do you brief for that? Because if there's a picture in your head that you and your dad telepathically were able to have, and you go, I know what the gauge is going to look like.
Yeah.
It's a blank sheet of paper.
Sure.
What happens?
Well, I guess with any concept, you got to have an idea of what you want yourself first and foremost. So, I mean, when we were able to secure the location, myself and Kathy really knew that we wanted to do a gastro style experience. So to us, that was pretty easy for us to concept because of our experience in England, in Ireland, traveling. We knew what we kind of wanted. So we really wanted to anchor the whole restaurant with the bar first. That really, if you go to any great gastropub in England, their focal point is the bar. So, and it also puts people at ease the minute you walk in the door, because it's just a little more casual. It's not so, it's not so formal, so people are already naturally at ease. Unless it's wall to wall and people are like, oh my God, get me to my table.
Right.
So from that standpoint, we kind of knew what we wanted. And then we really wanted to, we didn't want to be pigeonholed as a London gastropub. So we went for more of a European feel, which gave us a bit more, it just gives a bit more depth and breadth in what we could offer the guests. So we could be a little bit Irish, we could be a little English, we could be more European, have a little French influence, so, and our menu has reflected that as we've evolved over the last 13, 14 years.
Do you order them? It has to be sight and then smell, then then the taste and the menu. I mean, or does it change depending on what engagement you have?
I think it changed. I mean, obviously the menu changes as as customers' tastes are evolving. As trends are evolving. I mean, you got to stay current, but then you also have to have a core belief in who you are. I mean, at the end of the day, we're serving food and wine and booze, and it's not like people's tastes. They still like meat. They still like fried food, or they so. You just gotta.
Some of us more than others. Right?
Yeah, for sure. But I mean, obviously, as our business evolved, when we first opened, we were definitely more male dominant in terms of our customer base. Now we're 55% female clients. So we're trying to lighten up the menu. Back when we first opened, the idea of a vegetarian meal was just take the meat out.
Right.
So now you just got to be way more. You got to appeal to as many different markets as you can without selling your soul.
So. But I think that's a really important point, that the role of females, right, in society and how things are changing for the better, I would argue.
100%.
I think last time we had a conversation, I said, a bit more estrogen in the world will do those all. Mum hug is what we all need, right?
Take it down a notch, absolutely.
Exactly. But that's quite a shift, 55%. From it being a gastro pub. I mean, pub implies certain things, especially from Britain, Europe, Ireland, that means certain things, and
100%.
Somewhat intimidating, I would argue, for ladies to walk into a bar on their own versus what you've created here and how that's changing, how you're embracing it.
Sure.
So what do you do? How do you go about saying, ladies, you're welcome, please?
Well, our tagline is refined rusticity. So if you look at our menu, it says that. That was our tagline from the get-go. So that kind of really gives us an encompassing sort of mantra to be a little more varied in what we could offer. And, so from our wine list to our cocktail list, I mean, all facets of our beverage operation, can appeal to either, to male and females equally. The menu has definitely gotten lighter and needs to get, and my wife's been a huge proponent of that. So when I actually listen to her, things are much better. I mean, usually in the old days, it take about 2 weeks. Now it only takes a day. She's always right, man. It drives me crazy. But anyway.
I mean, is that something that you're tracking? And how do you go about tracking the demographic is changing?
Well, obviously, tracking is really easy with your P mixes, daily sales reports, item reports, So, but I mean, the tracking is only as good as how much you want to interpret the data. And then, the other odd thing you look at too is your core, your core menu, your core items, what are your top 3, what are your top 10, So we look at that, regularly.
So, you're up and running.
Yeah.
You've got the fear of God looking over you because you're in debt. You're mortgaged to the hilt. A 3-year-old at home.
Yeah.
And I know how that feels.
And a 1-year-old.
And a 1-year-old. Your dad's looking at you saying, "Well done, son. Let's keep pushing this." You're all in.
Yeah.
And now the brand is starting to develop itself.
Right.
You're not a new brand anymore. You've got past that first year.
Sure.
The brand is starting to mature. Great location.
Yeah.
And there's going to be some vibration there in terms of staffing and how you staff and the brand, because they're just as much as part of the brand as anything else, because they're table side versus you
100%
doing drive-bys.
Yeah.
How on earth do you train your people to be ambassadors for the brand and enjoy that? Because if you think about the audience again, most of these companies, the mandate's going to be, well, it's our people are our biggest asset. I would argue here it absolutely is.
100%. I think, when I opened the Gauge, I had an amazing, a good friend of mine was my opening general manager, and he had numerous experience in the F&B world. So he couldn't harp on enough about training, and culture. So that was a really good learning experience for me. And one of the best learning experience he gave me was one day he pulled me aside and go, "Listen, this is your place. You know what you're doing, but if you want to make sure that things move smoothly and that changes get communicated smoothly, you got to let me be the focal point for change." So that was a really good experience for me and a really big learning curve for me, just to see there has to be a process of how you disseminate information and how that information gets interpreted by your team. because it can't be me saying one thing one day and then another manager saying one thing the other day. There's got to be a cohesive, voice. So that was a big learning curve for me. And John really, his name was John Dooley. He put so much time and effort into the opening training plan.
You used the word culture.
Yeah.
I think that can be interpreted a whole bunch of different ways. You said service and culture.
Sure.
I understand the service at table side, etc.
Sure.
That part. Yeah. But how does culture show up, and how do you train for that?
Well, I mean, for me, our culture is about just, the restaurant business is so hard. So I think one of the most important tenets of any restaurant is to make people feel welcome the minute they come in the door. So you got to, that for me is kind of the start of our culture. Like, make people feel like they're wanted, that they're welcome. But that has to start also with the staff. So, you got to make staff feel that they're wanted, that they're welcome, that they're important. You need people to feel that, they want, that they're going to buy into who you are as an entity. And that you can't buy that. You gotta live and breathe that yourself. It's got to be organic and genuine.
So, in terms of the role of Billy,
yeah,
and then the role of the brand,
yeah,
and then the training that goes with it,
sure.
Is there an order there, or are they equal? How does that play out?
The role of, to be honest with you, it's the team that makes this happen. Obviously, I have a vision, and I'm here a lot. But Rebecca, my general manager, Wes, one of my lead servers, they make it happen on a daily basis. You know what I mean? Obviously, I give them the tools to be successful, and I back them 100%. And but at the end of the day, I'm more like just, I'm like, subterfuge.
Okay, so we talked about a blank sheet of paper.
Yeah.
And then the role of design.
Right.
How do you think about design? When I even use that term, what does that even mean to you?
Sure. Well, a restaurant is an experience, right? So the first thing you're going to experience when you walk into any restaurant is the visuals. How does it look? How does it feel? Do you want to be in this place? So I think from a design standpoint, that's one of the most crucial decisions and the most crucial investments you got to make. Because if people don't feel, if people can't feel comfortable, or if the feel of the place doesn't resonate with a guest, then you're screwed before people even sit down. So for us, it was really important to make this place feel comfortable. We wanted a place that felt like it was here for a long time, to give it a bit more, credence as a brand, so to speak. The biggest complaint we got from our design was the noise. So we had a tin ceiling in when we first opened, and so the noise, we just got so many complaints about noise. So just last year we actually renovated the whole ceiling, and it's actually an acoustical tile that looks like a tin ceiling. You couldn't tell, but it's phenomenal. It's totally changed the sound attenuation in this restaurant. So
more Chicago than a tin ceiling.
Yeah, for sure. But this is actually perforated. So I think you got to make an environment where people feel comfortable and where people want to be, and where it's convivial to convene, so to speak.
So if I think about our first conference, which we dubbed Fight Club some 4 years ago. Don't ask, it's a long story.
That's all right.
It was a good idea at the time.
You're still working for Mars?
Yeah, exactly. There was a conversation around the role of design.
Yeah.
Where do you place it in the marketing mix?
Yeah.
Is it a decoration station at the end? Is it in the middle to prove out an idea? Do you put it up the front as an innovation, or do you weave it all the way through? You've just specifically said you put design at the front.
Yeah. Because for everything. How do people walk through the place? How do they connect with a location? What do they see the minute they walk in? What do they feel?
What about the other touch points of media, social media, all of those things?
That's all peripheral, because without your core brand, and me as a restaurant, my core brand is a physical location. So that's all. To me, that's really not important until this is already in place.
Got it.
Yeah, you can build up buzz, and you can build up brand identity, prior to opening with nowadays with social media feeds, whatnot, and influencers. But at the end of the day, you have to have a location that's going to, I guess that A, these influencers can identify with, and then B, that people can get to. That's the business I'm in. People have to come into my restaurant.
That builds back into some of your first answers then, really. It was location, location, location. When your dad came here the first time.
For sure.
It was a shoe store.
Yeah, we totally believe it. But there was not, people said, at the time that the Loop was dead, people said there's no business in the Loop, there's no business after 5 o'clock. You know, I mean, Millennium Park had just opened, so that used to be like a really bad transient park across the road, and you know, the train tracks, it was pretty dodgy. I mean, obviously totally revolutionized that whole area. It's amazing right now. I mean, it's an incredible resource to the whole city, especially since they added Maggie Daly Park too. So that whole complex across the road is just is world class. So, you know, thankfully, a few people didn't realize it at the time, and we got lucky. I mean, you always look good when you pull it off, right? I'm a genius. I did it. Woo! I knew it all along.
I'll make sure I make a note of that. Yeah. Billy Lawless is a genius. We'll get T-shirts printed.
Oh, Jesus.
So that then leads to trends and insights.
Sure.
You mentioned earlier that your demographic has changed.
Yeah.
Your menu has changed. In the olden days, if they wanted a vegetarian version, just take the burger out of the bun and give them that, versus where we are now with meatless products that pretend to be meat.
Sure.
Different kinds of meats are on the menu. You know, I will call you out. Where's the bison? Because it was phenomenal.
Yeah.
But again, going back to where you were to where you are today and where the future of restaurants are going to be. Are we in the middle? Are we at the beginning? Has it settled down?
I think restaurants are always in a flux of change, because you know, you have some great restaurants that never change their menu ever, and then you have other restaurants that are changing it every week or every, you know, seasonality. So I think the experience of restaurants is very varied, because every restaurant offers something different to a guest, and every restaurant has something to give a guest that other restaurants don't have. You know, I mean, there's a lot of great restaurateurs in the city who give great service, who have, I mean, just as good environments as mine, who have, you know, just as good chefs, if not better chefs, if not better wine programs. You know what I mean? So, you know, again, it's such a microcosm of who you are and what you offer to people. You know, in terms of trends, you know, don't take me too literally, but like just take the meat out, but you know, be more, you know, acknowledging who your client base is very important.
So in traditional marketing sense, the CPG world, thinking about the audience, the default would be, you know, research in the evening, qual quant, you know, flashcards of images, which one do you like and why, etc. Which will give you a number, it will give you an answer to a certain extent. But I would also argue that lots of consumers now understand that game as well. They know what you're looking for. They know how to play the answers back to you and tell you what you want to hear versus what you need to know. How are you tracking trends and where these things are coming? You know, salmon from wherever's coming out of the blue.
I think you always want to be innovative, but at the same token, you need to have a sense of integrity to who you are as a restaurant. So we want to give good service, great food in a comfortable environment. So, you know, how do you give, what's the tenets for great food? So the first chef who opened this restaurant with me, Dirk Flanagan, he was brilliant. Like, so he had some incredible ideas. He had some, I mean, he was a really talented chef, you know, and he really helped us put us on the map. You know, so he really introduced me to like a whole realm of sort of the restaurant world that I was never exposed to, in terms of product sourcing, you know, fishes from all over the world that I never heard of, you know. So like, you know, as a restaurateur, you have to also like, you know, educate yourself and keep growing, you know. And that's one thing my wife's been incredibly instrumental in, is like pushing me to know more.
There seems to be some themes here already in this conversation. The first is how much you rely on your wife, that female intuition, or whatever you want to call it. The trust that you place in your team.
Sure. Well, I think it's very obvious. I mean, you know, as a professional, any professional, like, and how I was educated, you know, you got to surround yourself with people who know more than you do. Like, I don't know everything. You know what I mean? I have a certain experience in life. I have a certain educational experience. I have a certain experience in this professional realm of, you know, restaurants and hotels. But I don't know everything. So, you know, that's why, you know, you have to have people who have other skills than you to be successful. And then, you know, this is such an organic work environment. You know, the restaurant world has so many layered levels of experience, because it's such a transient market at times. I mean, you can have, like, you know, people with masters serving tables who, you know, are trying to like finish their doctorate, or you've, you know, actors, you have people who are trying to be doctors. I mean, so there's such a experience out there that you got to tap into.
Yeah. If you think about that for a moment, you never know who's going to be serving you at the
100%,
table. And in terms of what their skill set is, they actually might be smarter than you are.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, people poo-poo that too. So like people look at a server half the time and like, the amount of times I get a different experience at a table than one of my servers does, I can't tell you. I mean, that just goes back to just, the human condition, ego, whatever you want to say. People treat me better, and that's not right.
If I think about the conference over the last 2 days, one of the things that's come up is empathy, humility, honesty,
for sure,
integrity.
Yeah,
I mean, these are words that I would argue prior to everything that's happened this year were throwaway. They sounded good, but I think they've taken on more relevance in the last 12 months. Would you agree with that?
I would, Fred, but for me, I mean, they've always been part of who I am, right? So it hasn't been such a big, and I hate this term pivot, but like, humility is like, technically is like knowing yourself, right? So, and I mean, I always say to my team, like, in terms of, you're talking about humility and ego, my ego is vested in the experience of the guest. It's not about me. Like, yeah, I have an investment, I have a restaurant, but at the end of the day, it's the guest who makes the investment happen. It's the guest who pays the bills. It's the guest who makes everything happen. Because without guests, I mean, I can't open. As we're experiencing now with like this whole shutdown and all the stuff with COVID, all the restrictions, I mean, we're hanging on by a thread. So, empathy is something you have to practice. It's not something you can preach.
Right.
You know what I mean? Same with humility. I mean, either you have it or you don't. In my experience, I mean, I could be wrong, but, some people get to it after, life experiences make people change. And, but I think the success of what we've built here is that people know that they can come to me. They know they can talk to me. I'm not perfect. I mean, Jesus Christ. I mean,
I know that.
But, I mean, anybody's ever asked me for help, I've helped. And, I have such a varied workforce, I've very qualified and, educated individuals. I've like very uneducated people who do very menial work, and, I treat them all equally, you know what I mean? And I have people who are undocumented who need help and they've no one else to turn to. So, I take my role as an employer seriously. You got to look after the welfare of your people because they're looking after the welfare of you.
That sounds very community related as well.
But I think that's also part of my upbringing, like growing up in Ireland. And, I think, how to put this delicately, America is such a strange concept of socialism. And, because of the whole thing with the Cold War and communism and, America versus Russia, for me growing up in Ireland, like, this is who I am. I mean, do you know what I mean? I don't mind, if I have to pay tax if I know where it's going to. I don't mind helping people. I don't mind certain things that seem to be so contentious over here. I don't understand why they're contentious. I can't get my mind around it, to be honest with you.
With you on that one.
So sure. Like, healthcare, like, so we want to give people healthcare. Like, why is that such a bad thing? You know what I mean? So, and that's, my experience traveling, my parents were very giving individuals. My dad was always helping those who had less than him, and mom was just one of the most giving individuals I've ever experienced. My own trials and tribulations growing up. I had a rather checker past till I was 24, and I kind of righted the ship. Like, but the mom and dad's propensity to forgive my madness was very humbling. You know what I mean?
Right.
So all those things have kind of created who I am.
This is not the first time we as a nation, to go to your point about coming to America and the opportunities here, and financial downturn and pandemics, SARS 2008, the crash in 2008, to where we are today. Sure. Another double whammy.
Yeah.
So I can imagine it's been pretty difficult.
Yeah, it's been tough. So like, in terms of SARS, I don't even remember SARS. It didn't even impact us the way COVID has impacted us. I think the financial downturn impacted us a lot more. People weren't precluded from going out. There wasn't a mandate not to travel. There wasn't a mandate not to go into restaurants. There was no mandate about, social distancing. So it's a very different dynamic. So today's dynamic is incredibly complex because there's so many different variables, but it's a viral pandemic, right? So, people are afraid to be inside. We just installed this new technology that actually ionizes and cleans the air that's been pumped through the AC system. I don't know if that makes a difference, but it will give us, it will give people more confidence when eventually we can get back to full dining inside. I think from a business standpoint right now, I mean, it's been catastrophic. When we've gone from 450 employees down to 60 employees. I had to close one restaurant permanently just 3 weeks ago, which in itself, is rather stressful. Our menu is not where it needs to be in terms of what we're offering. Most restaurants, if you notice, our menus are limited. Everybody's going for the same pie. They're all, we're all trying to go. We're all trying to go, home delivery, special packaging, special experiences. We're all trying the same things. It's not like there's many different variables that you can try as a restaurant group to try and, to encourage sales. The biggest thing for me in the pandemic is that there hasn't been a cohesive plan, federally, right? So, if you look at other countries around the world, like the government response has been pretty, it's been unanimous in some ways. So that's been challenging because people are interpreting shutdowns and mask mandates differently. Right. So, I don't understand why, without sounding political, I don't understand why they made masks political. Seems like an obvious thing and a small bit of discomfort to wear a mask. It's not that big of a deal. And then, then the other side of the coin is like, the safety of my people who work for me, that's paramount. So part of me is like, yay, I'm open. And part of me is like, oh my God, I have to, I have a team that I'm responsible for too. So, you gotta, follow the mandates and follow the guidelines so that you make sure that your team are as safe as possible.
You mentioned earlier that how do you differentiate yourselves against other restaurants?
Right.
They might have a better wine list than we do. They might have a better chef than we do.
Sure.
We have access to better meat cuts than they do.
Sure.
We get first pitch on the vegetables or whatever it is.
Yeah.
But with the limits that have now been forced upon you, and you mentioned it's leveled things down.
Right.
Has that created a community within restaurants in Chicago? Say, hey guys, let's get together and. Yeah,
absolutely. But I mean, as it relates to like the sort of restaurant community, it's so hard to open a restaurant. I take my hat off to anybody who wants to open a restaurant. I mean, it's one of the hardest things you can do, I think, in any professional realm. So there always is a sense of community there. But at the end of the day, we're also very myopic in that, like, we all rely on revenues, right? We all rely on ultimately we just got to take care of what we can take care of. I will always help anybody who calls me or if I'm asked to help. But at the end of the day, like, there's only so much we can do for each other because we're all tied to revenue generation.
So, lessons learned.
Yeah.
I don't really want to dwell on the past because this conference is meant to be about the next 15 years.
Sure.
We'll get to that.
Yeah.
But in what you mentioned about 2008 and to 2020 where we are, there's going to be another economic downturn. Like these things are cyclical.
Yeah, 100%.
But how much of the lessons of these two examples are you going to be taking forward to better prepare you for the next one?
Sure. I think one of the biggest lessons, and I can speak for myself and my other partners to my other locations and other colleagues within the industry, is that like up until March 2020, like things were great. So I think we've all realized that we were a little too, well, I don't speak for every restaurateur, but as good as our costs were, like I think we all took a step back and really looked at our purchasing patterns and what we were actually bringing into the restaurants. What was essential, what was not essential. So I think going forward, you're going to see a big reduction in spending with major vendors, be it food, be it paper goods, be it liquor, wine, whatever. I think we all have bloated inventories, so that's going to be a big change. So there's going to be a readjustment, I think, in purchasing levels of restaurant groups, in my opinion.
And how is that going to affect consumers?
Dealing with consumers, so everybody's price sensitive, right? And then there's certain concepts where people are not price sensitive because they want that experience of the boiler wine, the boiler steak, or and then other concepts are like they're more geared towards value, be it the price value, be it size value. But like the whole realm of the restaurant world, covers all those aspects.
You mentioned earlier, and I'm glad that you did. It's something I've been beating a drum on for quite some time. Don't pivot.
Right.
And I think you and I have violently agreed there. But there is another word that is being used, or it's starting to surface, which is survival.
Oh, sure, yeah. Well, you got to be adaptable, right? So you look at some of the bigger, one group, for example, who what they've done since the shutdown's been remarkable. Like the Alinea Group, like so they were like a uber fine dining concept, like 3-month wait list, blah blah blah, right? So like they're like how they adapted to their to go platform, like pretty instantaneously, was pretty remarkable. I mean, it's probably an industry game changer in my opinion. So they had some things in their advantage, like they owned the platform Talk, which they do all your purchasing through. But like that was incredibly innovative. So there's always going to be like industry innovators, disruptors, whatever you want to say, no matter what happens.
Right.
I'm just not in the way my concepts have evolved and who I am as a restaurateur. My sort of to-go business is not really geared for to-go.
Right. I remember you and I talking about that some time ago when I moved down onto Michigan Avenue with Elizabeth back in the day, and I made a complaint to you. I think we were in here one night in a snowstorm or something.
Yeah.
I said, you bugger, you made me come all the way here for the shank, and you could have delivered it. And you actually explained to me pretty extensively around how much you're going to have to give the brand away.
Sure.
To a third party, and the inherent dangers of that, because your brand is let go. Has that changed now?
No, not at all. So I mean, once your product leaves your building, like you have no control on how long it's going to go, how long will it take to get to whoever purchased it. Is the driver okay? Is he going to 4 other locations first? That's always a concern. So I mean, I admire what a lot of these delivery platforms have done. I mean, good for them. At the same token, for us, it's giving up 30% of profit on a dish. I mean, it's somewhat unfeasible.
Right.
We still got to do it. I mean, a sale is a sale, but.
And does that fall into your survival mechanism then?
Well, we're trying, right? So, like for example, like we just amalgamated the Gauge kitchen downstairs to the Acanto kitchen. So we're offering both menus because we can run both menus out of the one kitchen as opposed to having both kitchens open. Okay. So we're hoping to have more traction with to go with that platform. I mean, to survive, you got to be adaptable, right? That's the essence of survival. You have to adapt. So we're trying to adapt. I can adapt and survive, but I don't have an endless runway. So the sooner the vaccine is in place, where people feel more comfortable coming back to restaurants, and the sooner the sooner the activation that I rely on to be successful. Like when's the last time you had a corporate lunch, for example? I mean, corporate spending, corporate travel, the theaters, the symphony. Like all the things that this location relies on, like I need that to come back. So, there's only so long I can survive.
Right.
Financially. I mean, we're at the right revenues.
I want to think about survival tips now.
Yeah.
So again, thinking about the audience, one of the reasons everybody's going to understand what happens to the restaurant trade, right? Or their favorite pub locally, because of all the things that you've described.
Yeah.
But I want to use this somewhat as a metaphor. And for you, as apparently you're the genius, we're getting those T-shirts printed, remember? Billy Lawless is a genius, to give some survival tips to other brands that might not be experiencing what you're experiencing, but it might happen to them.
Sure.
Right? And heaven forbid, the empathy that you've talked about in this conversation and community, etc.
Yeah.
If I think about dog food brands or candy brands or popcorn brands and so on, if this were to happen to them,
right.
What tips would you give to say, get ready for this, be prepared for that, don't do this, think about that, watch out for the government reaching into your pocket?
Right. Oh, wow. Well, first and foremost, like, once things start unfolding, you got to react, right? So I think as we reacted rather quickly to what happened because we're, again, because of Kathy, she was really following what was happening in China and the rest of the world. So, I mean, she warned me, hey, this is not going to be good. So, like, you got to have, I guess, some kind of pulse of what's actually happening out in the world. And then how do you react? I mean, so we really quickly realized to survive, we had to shut down straight away. And you got to make the hard decisions quickly, without emotion. You can still have feelings, but you got to make the hard decisions. And, sometimes you got to sacrifice some of your best people to survive. That's hard to do.
Yeah, for sure. Let's go back to the journey where we were at the beginning of the conversation then, because I think there's a nuance in here that is a Billy factor, is the way I would refer to it, right? young lad in Ireland, right against the Atlantic Ocean. The next stop is Boston, and
sure.
all those kinds of cliches.
Yeah.
But then there's dogleg to Egypt that you mentioned, and then coming to America and being in Chicago.
Yeah.
Surely there's got to be something in there in that upbringing and that experience. And you said, straightening yourself out by the age of 24, that has enabled you to have those conversations.
Right. Well, just going through my own personal, whatever trials and tribulations, my life was a mess, and then I had to literally, upend my life and change everything I did in life. So that experience has really, given me a sense of who I am as a person and what I'm capable of doing, and how to handle adversity. I can't say that word. Sorry.
Sorry.
And then the graciousness, like I said, the graciousness of my parents and their capacity to forgive me for what I did, because I wasn't good. Those kind of experiences, like they either go one or the other. They either go north or south. And thankfully for me, I was able to, learn from my mistakes. I mean, I nearly died through my own craziness.
Right.
And I got a second chance at life, and I've kind of grabbed it.
Kathy's name has come up in this conversation several times. Well, clearly a major influence. And fatherhood as well.
Yeah,
the time I've got to know you.
Yeah.
One has got to sharpen certain things, and one's got to soften certain things off as part of that education as well.
Yeah.
And it's clear that both of those things have influenced you here.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right, in terms of what you're doing.
Yeah.
Well, if I think about branding, brands are giving birth to babies all the time.
Sure.
They're having to grow up. They're having to mature. Some survive, some don't. If you think about Guinness, using Ireland as the metaphor, is older than this country.
Sure.
And there it is. And it hasn't really changed in that amount of time as well.
100%.
But it has re-energized itself again and again.
Sure.
As part of that journey and as part of this adaptation that we've been talking about.
Yeah.
What's that one little gem, a gift to the audience, just for a second, that you could say it's that, and everything stems from this one thing? What would that be?
Wow, that's a big question. I think you just have to have some personal integrity of what it is you want to convey. I mean, who are you? What are you? You know what I mean? Is it contrived? Is it real? You know what I mean? Like how? I mean, do you know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure. In the olden days, when P&G, for want of a better description, wrote the book on how to build brands. Yeah. And my education of being in Cincinnati for 10 years, working with them and servicing them, I felt like I was going back to university.
Right.
And what you mentioned about this place being a godsend, somebody would have told me in my journey, Cincinnati is going to be a godsend for you.
Sure.
There would have been a very big bet that that's never going to happen.
Right.
And lo and behold, thankfully, I did not place that bet because I would have lost.
Yeah.
And I'm forever grateful for it. But P&G talked about who am I, what am I, why am I right for you?
Yeah.
And essentially is who am I? I'm Tide, for example. What am I? I'm the best cleaning detergent for this. And why am I right for you? Because I get you clean the first time, every time.
Right.
It's pretty succinct.
Right.
But then they deliver on that promise and they deliver on those values. And that's a brand doing that.
Right.
You're a person doing that.
Right.
Right, and you're at the forefront of this. So is it that ecosystem that you're describing, that journey that you're thinking of to play those things out?
I mean, it's all part of the experience, right? I mean, every day you learn something. Every interaction is nuanced in some ways that it impacts you subconsciously or consciously. So I mean, I think you just got to be open to be teachable. The more open you are to be teachable, I think the more successful you can be in any endeavor.
With all the doom and gloom, and the theme of this conference about looking forward and being positive and not playing out the old cliches of pivots, etc., what is there to be positive about?
I mean, part of being who I am is I gotta exude a sense of calm and a sense of leadership that makes my team feel that it's going to be okay. So I don't have the luxury of sort of wallowing in poor me, woe is me, because there's people that rely on me for their livelihood. So, things that I could be grateful for, it's met as sharper operators in terms of, just cost of goods. We're going to be purchasing better. There won't be so much, cash stuck on the shelves, et cetera, like that. That's very kind of, basic. But, long term, we're all going to be survivors. I mean, every survival experience brings something. And I don't think it's played out enough yet to sort of talk about the nuances of that, but it definitely is going to make us more resilient as a, as a community.
When you say it hasn't played out, do you think we're still on a downwards? We're not on the up curve yet?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at what's happening, just with the numbers, and if you follow the numbers, I mean, it doesn't look good, right? So, and with just the sort of competing factions in this country politically, it's not going to look good for a while. If you talk to, most major, companies and their actuaries and analysts, I mean, they're out to like 2022 at best, right?
Right.
I mean, that's reality. I mean, if you look downtown right now, all the activations I talked about earlier, like, all the office blocks here, most of the major companies aren't coming back till April at the earliest.
Yep.
Earliest, and like occupancy downtown right now is like maybe 10% in these corporate buildings. So, it's going to take a while. That being said, different industries are affected differently. Like, Kathy talked about earlier when she was chatting to you, like, our world's been turned upside down. But there's numerous industries which, their only discomfort is they got to wear a mask and get temperature checked.
Right.
You know what I mean? So we're really, the hospitality industry has been really at the sort of, has been just decimated.
But if you think about control of the brand and the message, you've got the government here telling you what to do.
Yeah.
And they just showed up one day because of what we've all experienced. You have the weather now telling you what to do.
Yeah, for sure.
You've got consumers down here changing. Sure. 55% now female.
Yeah.
You've got diet changes changing as well,
sure,
which is outside of your control. But you have a view to all of these things.
Yeah.
What do you have control of?
Well, you can control what's happening inside the four walls. So that goes back to training, goes back to your concept, like, who you are as an entity. So I know I can control the service, I can control the quality of the food, I can control the experience as best we can within these four walls.
So that's a perfect segue into the theme of the conference, which is 2035, 15 years from now. We mentioned Guinness earlier, of course.
Sure.
Managing to stand the test of time.
Yeah.
You mentioned earlier that restaurants come and go for lots of different reasons.
Yes.
The Gauge in 15 years' time, is it going to be, I remember the Gauge and I miss it? Or is it going to be bigger and better than it was before?
Wow, that's a great question. So I think with our location, we have a great opportunity to survive till another 15 years with Millennium Park, Magadity Park, with the Art Institute, the Symphony, all the theaters around us, like all the activation. That if it comes back, I think we'll be fine. But how will that look in 15 years? I don't know. But I mean, you've been in pubs that have been been around 300 years.
Yep.
I mean, I went to Spain last year with my brother to see Liverpool win the Champions League, but we ate in a restaurant where they haven't turned the oven off in 275 years.
Wow. So
it was amazing. They're still doing the same thing. They're just doing suckling pig.
Right.
So restaurants, innovation happens, restaurant trends happen, modern, postmodern, old-fashioned, whatever you want to say. But at the end of the day, people want to eat and drink. So that's not going to change. And, people want to go out. They want to experience, environments that are vibrant, that are energetic, So I don't, personally, I think that, I don't think restaurants would be designed differently because we need volume to succeed. We need density. We need people. We need lots of people.
What do you mean a restaurant? That's actually pretty much the next question. If you're to design a restaurant for 15 years in the future, what do you think that would look like?
Well, obviously design evolves. I mean, we've all seen how design has evolved over the years, but I think operationally, you have a finite amount of space. And you need to get as many people into that space as possible to generate a profit. So and space costs money. So, I can't make money at 50% occupancy. So, long term, either landlords or, if you are going to have to give crazy breaks so you can have bigger spaces with, huge tracts of areas that are, social distance, etc., or it's going to have to go back the way it was. I don't see any other way, because, restaurants only have X amount of tables.
Right. And you're having to turn tables.
You got to turn tables to make money. That's the bottom line. Yep. Will there be innovation? Will there be? Yeah, of course. I mean, there's already stuff happening. POS systems. You can order on your phone. You can menus on your phone. People can pre-order before they walk in. That stuff is kind of it's almost like white noise in my opinion.
I feel like tactics to me versus long-term solutions.
Like long-term. I mean, people will still want to gravitate towards areas that look good. They'll still want to dine in an environment that if it's a special occasion, they want to go to a nice restaurant. I mean, I don't see that changing, personally speaking.
So, can I wave a magic wand moment then?
Yeah.
Knowing what you know, and knowing that there are certain parameters to operate a restaurant, period, regardless.
For sure.
Whether it's a restaurant's been sitting there for 200 years and they've never turned the ovens off.
Sure.
And then those ovens will still be running the next 200 years, to what you said, that in 15 years the gauge will still be here because of all the parameters that fuel the gauge, if you will. But if you could go back and talk to 32-year-old Billy, and give him a piece of advice, what would you tell him?
Oh, that's a great question. Lots of great questions today, Fred. Well, you give me a seizure with that jacket. That's a good. I think the biggest thing is that I think I have very good instincts, and my biggest mistakes professionally and my biggest mistakes in terms of key personnel has been not trusting my instincts. And so I would say trust my, that's not a problem now. But I think 5 years ago, 10 years ago, I should have trusted my instincts sooner and acted quicker.
So we move on to the last segment here, really, which is what I've referred to as giving gifts. Okay. So everybody who's attended the conference, of course, has done it gratis. And thank you again.
No worries,
I really appreciate it.
I'll get your Guinness today too.
Beautiful. But we're asking people to give the audience some gifts, some nuggets that would make them walk away from the conversation or the presentation in some cases to go, hold on a minute, I never thought about that lens before, and how can I use that?
Right.
So if you consider the audience that you've got, and you think about the businesses that they have, as I mentioned earlier, and the categories that they play in, as we bring this conversation to a close, what Billy wisdom would you put out there as sound bites, as thought starters for other folks in other industries to talk about the future in an optimistic fashion?
Sure. Man, you got me there. I mean, a lot of it goes back to ownership. You know what I mean? And for me, ownership is very, very personal, right? For you, you own your own company too. So a lot of brands, they're such big conglomerates, that it's like, how do you give a sense of ownership to what you're doing? And that goes back to, I guess, onboarding and culture and training. So I would say, if anything, to give people ownership, I would look at how that is interpreted within your own company structure. Now, ownership doesn't always mean financial stake, but how do you make people buy into who you are, what you are? People need to make money. People need to make a living. But I mean, if you have again, it goes back to the culture. Like, do they want to be part of who you are and what you're doing?
What about connectivity as an idea? Because you talked about that a lot at the beginning of the conversation. And if anyone that's been here and who knows you, as I said, the Billy presence, if you will, when you walk through the bar, everybody knows that. Everybody wants a piece of you.
Right.
There is a star-studded nature. If I think about some of my clients who are, or actually people that are not my clients that are on this, that they have that star quality as well. And I think sometimes they don't understand that part of it.
Right.
You are the global brand manager for brand X.
Right.
People want that.
Sure.
And how, as brands attract or businesses attract, because they know you want to be, they know that you're after money.
Right.
Right.
Sure.
That interaction between you and a table side when you're doing your drive-bys, when you're welcoming guests, or as you mentioned earlier, friends or locals.
Yeah.
What's that Billiness there that everybody on this conference could understand?
It's such a personal choice to choose a restaurant. I never take for granted a person's choice to come into my restaurant. Because there's so many options out there. There's so many other restaurants. There's so many other, you know. So I never take for granted anybody who walks through the doors.
Billy, thank you.
Thanks,
also, a pleasure to see you. Thank you for lunch. It was amazing as always. Just get the bison shank back on the
10-4 rubber ducky.
Definitely missed that. For the audience, I just want everyone to know that this is a favour that I called in, as I have every presenter at this event. And I think that what Billy's talked about today is really important for everybody. If we talk about empathy and what can you give, what can you do going forward, and a sense of integrity as well, I think is incredibly important for all of us as we get ourselves out of the situation. And you heard it from the man, I did not script it. Do not pivot. It's not a good idea, although I will have to pay him for that one for sure some way out of time. Thank you for your time.
Thanks,
really
Fred.
Appreciate it. If you're ever in Chicago, please come to The Gauge, one of my favorite restaurants in the city for sure, and you will have a great time. Say that Fred sent you. Good night.